The moment I told my husband I'd been fired, he didn't even flinch. No concern, no shock. Just pure boiling rage. "Of course you got fired," he snapped, slamming his laptop shut. "You've always acted like you know better than everyone. Maybe now you'll learn something." I stood there frozen, still in my work clothes, holding the straps of my purse like they were the only things keeping me upright. I had rehearsed this moment in my head a dozen times, imagining how he'd pull me into his arms, tell me we'd figure it out together. But this wasn't that moment. This wasn't that man. The truth? I hadn't been fired. I had been promoted. Unexpectedly, joyfully, after years of quiet, thankless work. But as I walked home that evening, thinking of how Brian had grown more distant, more distracted, I felt something in me hesitate. What if he didn't take it well? What if he resented me for getting ahead, for earning more than him? He was raised in a household where the man was the provider, the one who built the foundation, as his mother used to say. Still, I didn't expect him to explode the way he did. I remember how he looked at me like I was some liability, some dead weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Do you even understand the position you've put me in? How do you think we're going to pay the bills now?" He kept yelling, not once asking how I was feeling or what had happened. I said nothing. My throat had closed up, like my body instinctively knew I needed to stay silent. And maybe that was a good thing, because if I had told him the truth right then, I would have missed what came next. I would have missed the cracks beneath the surface that were finally starting to show. Instead, I just stood there as he raged on, telling me how I'd never contributed anything real. I barely remember how the rest of that evening went. I think I went to the bathroom and stood under the shower for half an hour, letting the water scald my skin as if it could wash away the humiliation, the confusion, the fear. That night, he slept on the couch without a word. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. There had been signs, I realized, signs I had ignored for too long. The late nights at work, the secretive glances at his phone, the way he stopped meeting my eyes when we spoke. And now this, his total lack of empathy. It wasn't just about the lie anymore. Something else was going on. Something darker. And I was starting to feel it rise beneath my skin. The instinct to survive. The instinct to know the truth before it destroyed me first. Looking back, the signs had been there long before I ever uttered a word about being fired. They weren't glaring red flags, at least not at first. Just small things. The way Brian started coming home later and later, always with a vague excuse. The way his phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, was now always face down, locked tight. I told myself it was just stress. His construction firm had taken on a massive downtown project. I wanted to believe that, because the alternative, the creeping suspicion that the man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years might be slipping away. Was too painful to face. But the moment that lodged itself into my memory happened 2 months before I tested him. I'd gotten off work early one Friday. I thought it would be sweet to surprise Brian, cook his favorite dinner. I let myself into the house quietly, thinking I'd catch him working in the living room. But as soon as I opened the front door, I heard his voice coming from down the hallway. He was on the phone, speaking in a tone I hadn't heard before. Serious, clipped. "No, she doesn't suspect anything yet," he said, followed by a long pause. "We just need a little more time." And then he laughed. Not the warm, playful laugh I used to know. This was something else, cold, detached, almost cruel. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the door frame, my heart pounding in my ears. He was talking about me. I knew it. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, as if nothing had happened, he walked out of the bedroom, saw me, and smiled. Kissed me on the cheek. I smiled back, went into the kitchen, started boiling pasta. But something in me cracked that evening. A quiet fracture, invisible on the outside but spreading quickly underneath. From that day on, I started watching him differently, listening more carefully. The way he avoided talking about the future, the way he grew impatient, the little lies he told without even realizing I'd caught them. My gut was screaming at me, and I was finally listening. It was a strange kind of grief, mourning the slow death of something while still pretending it was alive. Until that moment in the hallway after my fake firing, when the last of my illusions finally fell apart. That's when I knew something bigger was happening, something I hadn't even begun to imagine. But I was about to find out, and once I did, there would be no going back. It was around 2 in the afternoon when I heard the front door open. I had stayed home from work that day, claiming to feel unwell. Brian believed I was still unemployed, broken, vulnerable, afraid to face the world. He had no idea I was still working. No idea I was using the time to pull myself together quietly. I froze when I heard not one, but 2 voices enter the house. The second voice didn't belong to a coworker or a friend. It belonged to Linda, my mother-in-law. I stepped silently into the hallway, standing just beyond the crack of the guest room door. "So," Linda's voice rang sharp and familiar. "Why the sudden midday visit?" "It's all going exactly as planned," Brian replied. "She told me she got fired yesterday. Totally devastated. Just like you predicted." I covered my mouth with my hand, willing myself not to gasp. "Finally," Linda said, "she won't have any choice now. She'll have to agree to our terms." My knees buckled slightly. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. "She's completely dependent on me now," Brian continued. "Selling the house is just a matter of time." Linda let out a smug little chuckle. "See? I told you that girl was never right for you. Too ambitious. Too independent. You really think she'd be with you if it weren't for your father's house?" It felt like being punched in the chest. That house had been our home for a decade. And now they were planning to sell it like I was just some tenant they had finally tricked into leaving. "Don't start, Mom," Brian said with a sigh. "We already talked about this." "And what about Claire?" Linda asked. "When are you going to tell her it's time?" Claire. The name hit me like ice, watered down my spine. Claire Jennings, Mark's girlfriend before the accident. Mark, Brian's older brother who died 3 years ago. Claire had disappeared after the funeral. I had no idea Brian had kept in touch. "She's ready," Brian said, voice suddenly gentler. "The baby's doing great. Claire says he's growing fast. Already looks just like Mark." My stomach twisted violently. "I'll adopt him as soon as the divorce goes through," Brian continued. "He'll be my son. Our son." I couldn't breathe. Linda purred. "Just think how happy Claire will be when she hears the house is going up for sale. She's waited so long for this." My ears were ringing. My vision blurred. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a coordinated replacement. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. And the worst part was I had no idea how long this had been going on. No clue how many smiles, how many kisses had been lies. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was plotting. "I always knew Claire was the one for you," Linda said. "It's just a shame you met her too late. After you married that one." That one. That's how she referred to me. Not Rachel, not your wife, just that one. A placeholder. An obstacle. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. My entire body was shaking, but I couldn't stop listening. "Let's not get carried away," Brian muttered. "We still have to make sure Rachel doesn't fight us." "She won't," Linda replied confidently. "Not if you handle it right. Remind her she has nowhere to go. No job, no savings. She'll fold." I clenched my fists. They thought I was powerless, that I was trapped. But I wasn't. Not yet. Not entirely. "And what if she doesn't fold?" Linda asked. "What if she gets a lawyer?" Brian's voice dropped low and calm. Too calm. Then we hit her with the infidelity angle. I nearly stumbled backward. "Doesn't matter," Brian said. "I've got a few old photos from that conference she went to 2 years ago. Enough to raise doubt." "You're a clever boy," Linda said. "Just like your father." But he wasn't done. "If that doesn't work, we accuse her of leaking internal documents. I'll say I caught her trying to sell data to competitors." I felt my knees give way, and I sank slowly to the floor. My husband was planning to destroy my life from the inside out. He was going to lie in court, just to push me out. For Claire and a baby who wasn't even his. They were building a new family, Brian, Claire, the baby. And Linda, of course. Always Linda. And in their minds, I was already gone, just paperwork. Just one final conversation. I'll tell her tonight, Brian said. She's already on edge. It's the perfect time. I'll play the sympathetic card. Linda snorted. Push the pity. Make her feel like a burden. She caved. Women like her always do. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. But even through the pain, I smiled to myself because they didn't know the truth. I hadn't been fired. I had been promoted. And they had no idea that their plan was already falling apart. I stayed crouched behind the door long after they stopped talking. My body was frozen, but my mind was burning. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war, and I wasn't going to be a casualty. Not quietly, not ever. That night, I didn't speak to Brian. I didn't look at him. I didn't trust myself to, because if I did, I might break the illusion. And I needed that illusion, at least for a little while longer. In bed, I lay still with my eyes open, my back to him. He fell asleep quickly, like always. I listened to his breathing and planned. The next morning, I left the house before sunrise. I didn't go to work. Not right away. I went to the storage closet where we kept old documents. I pulled everything I could find. I needed proof. Evidence that I had contributed to that house, that I had invested in it with my own money. The new water heater? My bonus paid for it. The custom cabinetry? My design, my deposit. I dug out bank statements, delivery invoices. I packed them all into a box and drove across town. To the only person I trusted. When I showed up at her door, she didn't ask questions. She just looked at me for a moment, then stepped aside. I need a favor, I whispered. Say no more, she said. In her kitchen, I told her, if anything happens, if I disappear, if I stop answering calls, give this to my lawyer. Emily nodded slowly. Whatever you need. I exhaled, the tension in my chest loosening just a bit. For now, she understood enough. As I drove back home, I passed by the park where Brian and I used to walk on Sundays. I remembered how he once looked at me like I was his entire world. That man was dead. The one waiting at home for me now, he was a stranger in familiar skin. And tonight, that stranger was going to sit me down, look me in the eye, and ask me to disappear. He had no idea that I was already planning how to make sure it would be him who lost everything. When I walked through the front door that evening, I knew it was coming. The conversation. I could see it on his face, that forced concern, the artificial heaviness in his shoulders. Brian Carter was about to pretend to be the good guy in his own betrayal. Hey, he said, voice low, careful. We should talk. He gestured to the living room, already set up like a scene from a play. He dimmed the lights. 2 glasses of wine? Like this was going to be some soft, mutual discussion. Like he was doing me a favor. I sat. He took the armchair across from me, lacing his fingers together, letting out a theatrical sigh. Rachel, he began, I've been thinking a lot lately about us, and I think we've grown apart. I kept my eyes on the wine glass. Okay. I don't want this to be ugly, he continued. I just think it's time we both admitted this marriage isn't working anymore. He sounded heartbroken, like he was the victim. I mean, with you being out of work now, he added gently, maybe this is a good time for a fresh start. My stomach turned. I let my bottom lip tremble just slightly. Are you saying divorce? He nodded. Yeah, but amicable. Civil. I'm willing to help you get on your feet. You'll need a place to stay and some money to get settled. I tilted my head. Just enough to seem fragile. You'd do that for me? Of course, he said, placing a hand on his chest. I care about you, Rachel. We've both changed. He paused for effect, then added, and the house, it's legally mine. But I want to be fair. I'll offer you a settlement. I blinked. How much? He named a number. It was laughable, but I didn't laugh. I thought we'd try harder, I whispered. I thought we were stronger than this. Brian reached out, touched my hand. I'm sorry. But this is the best path forward. I promise. And right then, I gave him what he wanted. I nodded slowly, eyes misty, lips pressed tight in defeat. Okay, I said. I'll think about it. He exhaled, visibly relieved. But behind my silence, behind the trembling breath, I was already building my case, because he didn't want lawyers. But I was going to bring the best one in town. The next morning, I left the house before Brian even stirred. He was still snoring on the couch. I didn't leave a note this time, no explanation, just silence. Let him wonder. Downtown Portland was just waking up when I stepped into the old brick building where Monica Bell's office was tucked. I sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes that felt like a lifetime, rehearsing what to say. But when Monica opened the door and called my name, I stood up, walked in, and told her enough. The inherited house, the years of shared expenses, the way he wanted a divorce. Fast and quiet, with a sum so low it was insulting. Monica listened without judgment, her pen gliding over a yellow legal pad. You've been married 10 years? She asked. 12, I corrected. Any children? No. Proof of financial contributions? I have receipts, invoices, bank statements, everything. She leaned back. Rachel, you have a case, a strong one. But if we go forward with this, there's no turning back. It won't be pretty. I looked her straight in the eye. He already is. Something behind her eyes shifted. Respect, maybe? Then let's get to work. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Cooler. Lighter. I wasn't flailing in the dark anymore. I had someone in my corner. I went straight to the office after that. No more hiding. Brian thought I was unemployed, lost, vulnerable, but I was back. Fully. My phone buzzed around lunch, a text from him. Hope your interviews went well. Let me know when you're ready to talk. Next steps. I almost laughed. He had no idea I'd already taken them. I replied with a simple, will do. That afternoon, I met with my team, reviewed quarterly goals, signed off on a new client project. I was efficient, focused, unshakable. And when I finally walked out of the building at sunset, I knew something had shifted permanently inside me. I wasn't the same woman who cried in the hallway. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone stronger, sharper, ready. He wanted me to vanish quietly, but now I was preparing to take everything back. On my terms. Brian was waiting for me when I got home. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. But the twitch in his jaw, the slight shift in his weight, he was nervous. Hey, he said casual. You got a minute? I hung my coat slowly, then turned to face him. Sure. We sat opposite each other again. The same setup. He thought the first performance had worked. I've been thinking, he began. I want to finalize things soon. Get everything settled so we can both move on. I nodded, keeping my expression soft. Okay. He blinked. So you agree? I'm not fighting the divorce, I said gently. But I do want to understand what's fair. So I've spoken with someone. He froze. Someone? A lawyer. His eyes narrowed. Why would you need a lawyer? I'm offering a generous settlement. I tilted my head. You said the house was legally yours, right? It is, he said quickly. But we've both lived there for over a decade. I've invested money. I just want to make sure it's fair. He laughed, sharp and defensive. Rachel, come on. You lived here. That's not the same as owning it. I paid for the kitchen remodel, I said softly. The bathroom tiles, the appliances. I just want that acknowledged. Brian stood up, pacing now. I don't want this to get ugly. Then don't insult me with a number that barely covers 3 months of rent. He turned toward me. And for the first time, the mask slipped. I saw it, the flash of anger, of panic. You're being unreasonable. No, I said calmly. I'm being smart. You taught me that, remember? Plan ahead. Protect your assets. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting. You really want to do this? I think it's necessary, I replied. You said you wanted things to be fair. This is how fairness works. He just stared at me as if trying to recalculate, reframe me in his mind. I was no longer the fragile wife he thought he'd broken. I was something else now. A problem. Half the house, I said, just what I put in. And maybe a little more for the time you wasted lying to me. His jaw clenched. He didn't deny it. And in that silence, I knew he was finally afraid. He thought I would break. He didn't expect me to sharpen. The divorce went through 6 weeks later. Not quietly. Not quickly. Brian dragged his feet once he realized I wasn't going to play dead. But Monica was sharper, smarter, ruthless when she needed to be. She had a copy of every receipt, every transfer, every signature I'd ever made on that house. In the end, I walked away with a respectable settlement and full legal recognition of my contributions. The last time I saw him, we were signing papers in a sterile conference room downtown. Claire wasn't there, but I could feel her ghost behind his shoulder. Quiet, passive. Brian didn't meet my eyes. Not once. When it was over, I stood, tucked the pen into my bag, and said, "You always underestimated me." I saw it in his face. Regret. Or maybe just disbelief that the story he had written for me didn't end the way he planned. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. Not fancy, not big, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I kept every light on. Not out of fear, but because I could. Just silence, peaceful, earned. Word got around that Claire and Brian were having adjustment issues. Things weren't as idyllic as they'd imagined. Money was tighter than expected. Claire hadn't quite fit in the way Linda had hoped. None of it surprised me, because their life was built on lies, and lies don't hold foundations for long. I don't spend my days checking in on them. I don't stalk social media. I've rebuilt from the ground up, in my own way. I've learned that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Sometimes it's healing. There are pieces of me I thought were lost, but they were just buried under years of being small. And now I take up all the space I need. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Being underestimated is the most dangerous gift life can hand you. Because when you rise, when you fight back, no one sees it coming. Brian thought I would crumble. Instead, I became unshakable.